Good morning. Welcome to our 5th annual McLean County Community Behavioral Health Forum. If you attended in the past, especially in the 2020-2021 season, as we'll call it, then you have attended virtually with us before, and we are excited to already have this virtual format under our belt to be able to do it again this year. I'm Tricia Malott. I have served as the county's Behavioral Health Coordinating Council Supervisor for the past 3.5 years and am happy to present this again. You may hear some of the tornado sirens in the background. Slightly poor planning on our part to start right at 10 o'clock on the first Tuesday of the month. But this week is Mental Illness Awareness Week, and given the fact that we have been hosting the forum in October in the past several years, one, we wanted to keep with that for consistency so that the community begins to know that the forum will be held in October of each year, and think it's timely to ensure that our kickoff coincides with Mental Illness Awareness Week. So today is our very first day, and we are excited to start with one session now on healthy mental health in a world of uncertainty. And then we have a second forum session as part of our kickoff day that starts at noon, which is a panel discussion of some of the McLean County initiatives that are going on that really center around caring for each other. If you have attended any of the forums in the past, you know that this idea and concept originated out of the Mental Health Action Plan back in 2015 to really raise community awareness, reduce stigma, educate the community about available resources, and bring people together. So we have stuck with the original theme that started in that very first forum year of We're All in This Together. And it just continues on, and we find new and additional ways really to incorporate that. So a few housekeeping tips, and then I will get into introducing our speaker for today. So if you attended virtually with us in the past, you will know that all of your microphones are off automatically. There is a question section of the GoToWebinar platform, where if you have questions throughout, please type them in. We do ask that you provide context rather than, as an example, if our presenter is on a particular slide and your question is, can you tell me more about that? If you could be more specific and identify, can you tell me more about the credentials that you have? Or can you tell me more about word A? That way, at the end, when all of the questions are given to our presenter, they have context and they're read aloud, and we will make sure that all of those get addressed. You will also note that there are 5 handouts attached to today's webinar, and you will find that if you have registered for multiple webinars, that these are consistent for each of them. One of the things that we asked our planning committee and our presenters and panelists was to send us some information that all of you as attendees could begin to incorporate in your daily life, or either for your own emotional well-being or to help care for others around you. So that's one of them. You'll also find some handouts on upcoming mental health first aid trainings, as well as some information and resources from PATH. So please check those out. Feel free to print them. We will also make sure that they're available on the county's website with the forum information, so you can reference them again in case you missed them. So without further ado, I will introduce Sarah Stalter. Sarah is a certified recovery support specialist with the McLean County Fuse team and is currently pursuing her master's in social work through Boston University. She has previously been trained to facilitate Wellness Recovery Action Plan, also known as WRAP classes, and she most recently completed mental health first aid instructor training. Sarah started in the mental health field as an employment specialist, but has been a part of the recovery community for much of her life. She is a movie guru, a devoted dog and plant mom, and likes to kickbox, garden, and create nature-inspired jewelry in her free time. And if you did not check out the session that she did for us last year, also virtually, it is another very worthwhile session to watch. So I will turn it over to Sarah as she helps us all better navigate the uncertainty that we live with right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Tricia. I'm excited to be back, and especially talking about what healthy mental health looks like in a world of uncertainty. This is a very relevant topic, I think, for most of us, especially the last 18 months. So I'm really excited to be tackling this today. Just a couple housekeeping things. Always have to do that at the beginning. I'm going to do my best to spell out acronyms as best I can. I know that's very frustrating when someone just starts throwing out acronyms to you and you're not exactly sure what they all mean. If at any time I slip on that, feel free to type it out so that I can clarify that as we go. I will also do my best to use person first language. And I'm also going to do my best to be very respectful of others' experiences, and I ask that everybody else do the same. We're going to be talking a lot about self-care and coping, and there's going to be a mention of some more intense topics such as abuse. And everybody comes from different backgrounds, and so sometimes our experiences don't line up with others, and that's perfectly okay. In that, there might be suggestions I give and other things that we're talking about that might not work for you, but others do. Also perfectly okay. Also, I just want to say, you do you. The nice thing about this virtual platform is people are a little more open to doing what you need to do to stay well. So as we're talking about things, if you need to move about, go get a glass of water, do what you need to do to stay well, you do you. And then the last is I want to give a little bit of a spoiler alert. This is a very large topic, something I could talk for hours on, and some people spend semesters on. So I want to give the spoiler alert that this is a start. This is the starting block for jumping into how to navigate this, giving tips and tricks in order to get yourself going. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing, breaking it up into 3 parts based on what I'm going to call your mental health go bag. Any of my other emergency preparedness nerds out there know that you got to have a go bag in case of emergency. And so I'm going to present this like that. And the first part is going to be about your GPS and your map. We're going to talk about this idea of what being healthy looks like. I'm going to talk about spoon theory again. I got a lot of positive feedback on that in the spring, so I wanted to bring that back. We're going to talk about stressors, what uncertainty looks like. And then finally, we're going to have a little fun with biology. We're going to talk about what that looks like in the body. Part 2 is we're going to talk about your umbrella. And this has to do with resiliency, adaptability during times of uncertainty, coping, self-care, and then monitoring that as well. And then part 3, I'm calling it your watering can. And this is going to be applying all of this information on how to take it all and move forward with it. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about spoon theory. I love spoon theory. I actually sometimes have a little charm on me in this little spoon because it's a really great way to illustrate to somebody what your breaking point looks like. And I think we all have gotten to that point at some point in the past 18 months, but everybody's looks different, and that's what's unique about it. So a young woman has lupus and was sitting in a diner one evening talking to a friend, and the friend asked, hey, what is it like to live with this? And she looked around and ran around to all the empty dining tables and grabbed all the spoons. And she said, every day we all have a certain amount of spoons. And when you're out of spoons, you're out. And, for you, it might take 1 spoon to get ready in the morning. It might take a spoon to drive to work. It might take 1 spoon, to get through the day. You have some coffee, it only takes 1 spoon, that's fine. You have another spoon, getting home, traffic's obnoxious, takes an entire spoon just to get home. Then you have 2 spoons, if you have to do laundry, errands, whatever, and then you have another spoon, cook dinner, have some fun. You have those at the end of the day. Now, somebody with a chronic issue, their spoons look a little different. Getting ready in the morning might not be 1 spoon. In fact, it might be getting out of bed is 1 spoon. Picking out your clothes is 1 spoon. Brushing your teeth alone might be 1 spoon. Getting out the door and into the car is another spoon. Driving to work is a spoon. And holy cow, we are left with 1 spoon and we just made it to work. That is a perfect illustration of what it looks like if you are chronically dealing with something. And I think especially now, we all can identify this with stress. It doesn't only apply to a physical chronic illness or a mental chronic illness. I want to take that and I want to apply it just to your everyday life, because I think we all have hit our breaking point at some point in the past 18 months, and that's what I want to jump off of, is when we're coming up at the end of our spoons, what do we do? Oh, there we go. I want to start off with having a blank slate. We talk a lot about this word healthy. And if you're looking at these pictures, you know, you got vegetables, you got managing your weight, working out, maybe you take meds, you're doing some hobbies, have some friendships going on. This is what healthy looks like. However, words are really powerful. And if we put your daily life as healthy and unhealthy, you come into the experience with an expectation. And if you don't hit that expectation, you failed yourself. So if you put yourself as healthy or unhealthy, you can set yourself up to failure, because in reality, every day is going to look different. And your version of healthy is going to look different than somebody else's. Just like your amount of spoons and what it takes to get through the day with your spoons looks different to somebody else. So I suggest we do away with healthy versus unhealthy. Instead, we look at thriving and surviving. All coping skills come for a reason. And if we come to it with a little bit of grace and giving ourselves a little wiggle room, you realize that some of those coping skills that we've had to do to survive, we also can then mess with to thrive. And so when we're looking at coping, and we're going to get into this later, what is it doing that you're using in order to just tread water, and what ones are you using in order to actually swim forward towards your target? So we're going to start talking about stressors. Stressors can really be anything in life: friends, family, work, money, love, health, school, you name it, it can stress you out. And that also includes good stress. When my husband and I were planning our wedding, it was one of the best times of my life. It was also incredibly stressful because there's a lot of change going on and there's a lot of uncertainty. But there's other things that can cause stress too. Don't end it there. Taking into consideration the environment, temperature can be stressful. I'm a person, I need to be cold. My mom used to say that I like it to be like a meat locker in my house. If the colder, the better. If it's hot, I get really stressed out. Sunlight can be a stressor for some people. The lack of sunlight. Food, what you're eating, what you're not eating, how much. Water, your intake of water, and then rest. And that's not just sleep. That's also just resting your body and giving it the relaxation it needs in order to recharge. So we're going to talk a little bit about biology. I have a love-hate relationship with the phrase, it's all in your head. A lot of people that have dealt with mental struggles of any kind have had at least one person be like, hey, you know, snap out of it. It's all in your head. The funny thing is, it is. That's where it starts. So if you're looking, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but if you look at the center of the brain, you got this place called the amygdala. And that's the center of your brain where it detects what's a threat. It's part of, I like the term the lizard brain, that is like the very beginning of our evolutionary process, what allows us to decide how we need to react. So if we detect that something's a threat, it starts sending signals down to the hypothalamus, which wakes up the pituitary gland, gets down to the adrenal gland, gets to the kidneys, and boom, all of a sudden you start releasing hormones such as cortisol and other things that then start circulating through your blood and waking up the rest of your body to, hey, there's a threat. We need to prepare for that. It's very interesting that there's an author and professor, scholar, Bessel van der Kolk, one of my favorite books about this topic, The Body Keeps the Score, and I have it written down at the end of the slide. He talks about that it's interesting, the time that takes for the amygdala to send the signal to the hypothalamus to say, oh my gosh, we have a threat, is faster than it takes for that same signal that there's a threat to get to your prefrontal cortex, which is where your body goes, oh, okay, we can figure this out. So when your body detects a threat, it actually already starts reacting involuntarily before you can already say, I don't need to worry about that. So in reality, it is all in your head. but it doesn't end there. That's just the domino effect. It starts impacting your cardiovascular system. Your blood starts circulating all of those hormones. It messes with your heart rate, your blood flow. Your blood flow might put more blood into your muscles in order to prepare you for that alertness. But if you're not breathing regularly, your blood actually has less oxygen in it. And so you might tense up, you feel guarded, you have pain in your shoulders and neck and back. Little by little, the more your blood circulates through you, the more those hormones prepare your body to respond to that threat. However, if you do not stop that, it will just keep going. And interesting thing about that is though we're preparing for battle, our brain is ready for it. It has to stop. So we have two different kinds of nervous systems. One's called the sympathetic nervous system, and that is our brain triggering us to, we got a threat. We got to respond to this. We have to stay alert. Then we also have the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's the break. You start triggering other hormones that says, okay, muscles, you can relax now. Okay, heart, you can go back to just your base level beating. Your emotions start regulating, your breathing starts regulating, and you come back to normal, whatever normal looks like for you. But with that sympathetic nervous system, if you just keep hitting that gas and you feel threatened and you feel threatened and you feel threatened, what happens if you just keep speeding up and you don't stop? Eventually you get so fast that it's harder to hit the brake. Hitting that brake takes more time to stop. It takes some wear on your brakes, and eventually you might even run out of gas. So where did it begin? If someone is not exactly sure what triggers all of this, and it's really easy to say, you know, what caused it? Not always. I say work backwards. When you're going through a financial struggle, most likely your brain is thinking about that financial struggle. But while that is going on, you might have other body changes. You might have change in appetite, change in sleep. You might have change in bowel movements. We're gonna talk about that a little more. That is something actually that we don't talk about enough. There's a very large connection between your gut health and your brain health. And so while you're going through those financial struggles, relationship struggles, monitor what your body is doing, what is changing in your body. And when this changes, take a look at what else changed in your life. Good example of this is if you've noticed that you're not sleeping as well. Take a look back to when that kind of started happening and what was going on in your life at the time. I'm a big coffee drinker, so I always got to have at least 1 cup in the morning. But the later I have it in the day, the more likely I am to have issues going to sleep at night. If I'm having sleep issues, look back, I had started drinking caffeine later in the day. There's the trigger. Now, it's not always as easy as that to figure out what caused it. So if you're not sure, get help. Track it. There's lots of tracking apps. Write it down. Seek a professional. There's some people out there that like this is their jam. Go to them for that. But also just ask. Ask friends, family. You never know what people might have noticed. That you say, man, I got a headache. All of a sudden, your friend goes, yeah, you seem to get headaches a lot right after work. So there could be a connection between that work and your headaches. If you see the impact of that stressor, you can move backwards and see what's triggering that. And that's then how we can respond. So we've been living in this big old world of uncertainty, and uncertainty comes in a lot of forms. It can be other people, transportation. Every time you get in a car, there's an aspect of uncertainty. Financial stress, politics, the environment. I mean, we're going through climate change right now. Love, conflict, natural disasters. Did I mention we're in a global pandemic? All of these things look like stressors, but there's something they all have in common. There's a lack of control, and we have less ability for foresight with them. Now, if you're dealing with one, that's its own story. But you start adding them up, and maybe you're having a health issue. You're changing residence. You might be having some financial stress, and now you got a pandemic, and you've just broken up with your significant other, and it just keeps adding and adding and adding and adding, and it's chaos. It's pure chaos. So I really like a specific definition from Merriam-Webster. that it is the inherent unpredictability in the behavior of a complex natural system. And when I first read this, I hated it a little bit because it says it's natural, and that doesn't feel good. But that is also what life turns out to be, that there's always going to be something else. There's always going to be something else that jumps in. Now, this definition really puts to like your heartbeat and things like that. That's what it's talking about. But I want to transfer it into this idea of uncertainty, because we're always going to deal with some aspect of uncertainty. The best thing I argue that you can do is to prepare for the fact that it's always going to be there. And there's only one way to do so. You got to stop. So the first thing we're going to look at is your umbrella in your go bag. If you're driving through downtown Chicago, and I want to go back for a sec, look at that background. You're driving through somewhere, you don't know where you're going. There's cars going all which way. There's neon lights going. You got pedestrians crossing the road. It's chaos. If you don't know where you're going and there's cars going in front of you, you have to stop. Because how are you going to keep going forward in this place of uncertainty if you don't know where you are right now? You have to stop and you have to evaluate, where are you on the map? And that's where the umbrella comes in. One way to do this is mindfulness. When I originally thought of mindfulness, I saw this kind of picture, that there's the guy sitting there in quiet, zen, peaceful, deep breathing, and I was awful at it. And that took a lot of time for me to unravel the idea that it doesn't have to look like that. In fact, a lot of times it doesn't. It all really comes down to breathing. So when we were talking about the biology of it, we were talking about your blood circulating through and the oxygen. One of the best ways to get all of that to stop is to put oxygen back into your lungs in the amount it needs to in order to get that to circulate and allow your muscles to relax, allow your body to realize that it's not under threat. If you're not a big fan of just, okay, let's just do some deep breathing, count. If you want to just do it in fours, you breathe in through your nose, hold, out, hold, and keep going as long as you want. All sorts of apps. I think a bunch of smartwatches even do this now. They can like detect your heart rate, all sort of craziness, and it's like, hey, you need to like relax and deep breathe, things like that. But if you're like me and you're not about just like sitting there and counting and whatnot, perfectly fine. Add to it. One of the things I've talked to people is that they'll add some sort of imagery. And one I've heard that I think is really interesting is, as you're doing this deep breathing, keep your mind busy by imagining you're a tree. And so if you have like your feet on the ground, or you're laying on the ground, whatever it is, whatever part of your body is touching the ground, you send out roots from that. And those roots expand out into the dirt all around you. You can feel your surroundings, and the branches come out from the top, and you start taking up space, and you find your place in the earth. That's one type of imagery. Other people they'll imagine they're on a beach and they're listening to the waves. You can add sound to that. That's a really good way also. Other people need to move. Obviously, you can tell I'm using my hands a lot. I like movement. It can be, walking around, swing your hands, whatever you have to do, you do you. One that I really like, there's a big version of it. I carry a little one in my purse because, like I said, I'm that nerd. It's just an infinity symbol, and you can do it with any little shape, but you use the infinity symbol that you just draw it, and you breathe in and breathe out, and breathe in and breathe out. And you can do that anywhere. You can put it in the air. You can like mark it on a piece of paper, however you want to. That movement, that repetitive movement, helps you get back into that rhythm of breathing and putting that oxygen back through your body so you can relax a little bit. Okay, say all of that is super boring for you. Fine, mix it up. I'm going to use my coffee here because I don't have a thing of water. It's still early for me. Take a drink. If you have a cup of water with you, try it. If you take a drink, notice what you do with your breath. You will naturally take in a breath right before you take a drink. You will hold your breath while you drink, and you will exhale once you are done swallowing. It's an easy way to just stop. The other thing is blowing bubbles, very similar. I like this one because then you got bubbles flying all over the place and you got the extra smile. It's a lot of fun. But you breathe in, you blow out, and those bubbles go. However you want to make it happen, like I said, you do you. There's lots of ways to do it. Explore it. Find what works for you, what doesn't work for you. The last one I want to talk about, this is my absolute favorite because it's really easy to remember. You don't need anything except to count back from 5. So part of finding your place on the map, we said, is recognizing where you are. And a really good way to do that is to connect with all of your senses, because when you're stressed, chances are one of them is overloaded. You're not connecting with your surroundings. So start from 5, and you can either say it out loud, you can write it down, you can just point to it, you just think it in your head, whatever you want to do. Think of 5 things you see. Like I see my coffee cup, I see the mouse, I see the computer, I see my hand, and I see the phone over there. Now 4 things you feel. I feel my shoe, I feel myself on this chair, I can feel the hair on the top of my head, and I can feel my bracelets. Now let's do 3. 3 things that I can hear. I hear my little bracelets going, I can hear my voice, and I can hear the air conditioning. 2 things you smell. I can smell my coffee, and there's a nice little aroma of peppermint. And then 1 thing you taste. I got my coffee. And before you know it, you're more in tune to what is literally physically around you, because you have to start with what you know before you can tackle what you do not know. So I'm going to talk a little bit about emotions. This can really be some people's not favorite topic. But I think it's very important when we're talking about grounding, about talking about where you are, is to take a look in. If you know how you feel, you can better target of why you're feeling that and what triggered it. So let's talk about some of them. If you're saying in your head, I didn't choose this. This isn't what I wanted. You're feeling angry, and that's okay. That's great. You're feeling that. You can then dissect why you're feeling that way, what it is that triggered that, and then what you're doing because of that. And I think I chose some of the quotes of things that I've heard over the past 18 months. How do you navigate this? How many people have felt confused or overwhelmed? I can't manage this. What comes next? There's that anxiety piece. What can I possibly do to influence this now? You're helpless. Each of these feelings are triggered by something and then also trigger what you do. So we figure out how we're feeling, then we recognize what we do about it. So generally there are 4 stress or trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. If you're not familiar, I always like explaining fawn a little bit, that it's kind of that people-pleasing aspect where you decide to blend in with the crowd and just go along with it and seem like everything is okay. So if you are angry, you did not choose this. You recognize how you feel, and then you realize when that happens, you freeze. So now we've taken stock of what's in our surroundings. We've taken stock of how we feel. We've figured out, what am I doing about this? We have our umbrella up. We've been able to stop. Great. Now we're figuring out where we're on the map. We've pulled out our GPS. Now we can. You're under the little umbrella. You've recognized where you are, and that is grounding. That is the whole beginning of that. And then you're on your way. In order to do that, we have to acknowledge where we are and know what we do know before we can accept what's happened and face the future of what we don't know. So let's go into that. How do we prepare then for the future that's uncertain? And I'm going to say something some people won't like. You can't. You can't stop it from raining. It is going to rain. And the more you try and stop it from raining, the more frustrated you're going to feel. What you can do is you can carry that umbrella. You can carry those coping skills with you, those mindfulness techniques. We're going to get to your self-care and coping skills. You can carry that umbrella with you. So when you need to stop, when you need to like put up that shield so you can check your map, throw that in your go bag. So when the uncertain hits, when those stressors hit, you're prepared with your umbrella. I would be remiss to not talk about resiliency here. Resiliency, Merriam-Webster talks about it as the ability of something to return to its original size and shape after being compressed or deformed. So I got this little guy. He's cute and he's happy, and then he's mad. I keep him on my desk. He's really fun. But when I compress him really tight, nice little coping thing here, when I let him go, he goes back to his original size. Pretty really resilient, right? The American Psychological Association then puts that into mental health. It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. I don't know if anyone else out there can, but I relate to try and working through that adaptation process over the past couple of months. So, okay, let's talk about it. Resiliency is not just something you're born with. You can have risk factors and then work on protective factors. So your level of risk of things going wrong, developing an illness, all of those things, they go up with different risk factors. And you reduce that risk by introducing protective factors. So some of those risk factors, yes, are some things that you're born with, and there are other things that just happen. They're all over the place. You know, you got genetics, gender, stressors, discrimination, housing, employment, substance use, all sorts of things, all sorts of risk factors. And one of them there is the adverse childhood experiences, which we're going to get into a little bit. I really like talking about ACEs because I think it's a really great example of that impact on the body, like we were talking about that trigger in the brain where it has that a lasting effect on the rest of your body. That's what this study really gets into. So I believe it was between 1995 and 1997. The CDC, the Kaiser and CDC both together did this study, that adverse childhood experiences. I'll probably be calling it ACEs from now on. So when they were doing this study, they wanted to see what were different things that happened in childhood that had lasting effects through somebody the rest of their life. And they came down to 10 of them. One being physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect and emotional neglect, a family member that is struggling with mental illness, a family member struggling with substance use, a family member that is incarcerated, witnessing your mother being abused, and parental separation, and that can be divorce, death, whatever that looks like. Now, if you're starting to add these up and you're like, I got a couple of those, are you saying that because of those risk factors, I'm, SOL? No, actually, you're not alone. About a third of the population doesn't have any, but a quarter of the population has at least one. And if you go down, 12.5% of the population has at least 4 of those. So you're in good company. There's a lot of people that have just as many risk factors, and that's not the end of the story. So you got these risk factors, and they can impact all of these things. And these are the ones that the ACEs study found. Everything from chronic illness, mental health, cancer, diabetes, you're more likely to use substances, more likely to struggle with work and income, school, you name it, it impacts it. But then we come to protective factors. So say you have all of those ACEs, say you have those other risk factors, okay, then we balance the scale. So the protective factors, there's things like determination, self-belief, social skills, problem-solving, communication, emotional regulation, which is something you can practice and work on. It's a skill. Optimism, relationship, socioeconomic factors. How do we build these though? And lo and behold, that's where we've come to self-care. Now, there's a couple myths I want to talk about here before we move on. And one is that self-care is selfish. Self-care is time-consuming and expensive. Self-care is all good. Self-care looks the same for everybody, and self-care is temporary. None of those are true. When you're taking care of yourself, you're making sure that your glass is full enough that you can pour into whatever you're going to pour into. You know the phrase that you can't pour out of an empty cup? That's where this gets to. Self-care does not have to be time-consuming and expensive. You don't have to go out and buy all the latest things. You don't have to go out and buy fidget things, though they are pretty awesome, can't lie. But you don't need to go spend a lot of money on a fancy massage, things like that. It doesn't have to be. If you go back to like that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise, that's just in your head. You can do that anywhere. You can take it with you anywhere. It doesn't have to cost money. Everybody has the ability for some kind of self-care. All self-care is not good. I am the kind of person that I like to have my chocolate. I need my chocolate, I say in my head. But there's a difference between me having a piece of a chocolate bar and me having 3 chocolate bars. There has to be the balancing game. Self-care does not look the same for everybody. I had somebody that gave the example once that he was talking to somebody that loved to fish. You know, the quiet, you go out on the water, you just spend the time in the peace of nature. Loved fishing. That was a great coping skill for him. But somebody else was like, fishing is a major trigger. That's too quiet. I get bored. That self-care, completely different for those 2 individuals. And the last is that self-care is temporary. The idea of self-care can be temporary, but if you practice it and you practice it and you practice it, it becomes easier to pull up that umbrella when you need to in order to also then take care of yourself while you need to. So there's a little bit of a difference between self-care and coping. I sometimes use them interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same. Self-care is more the process of that like preventative measure. The things that you do to stay well, that can be daily, it can be as needed, whatever that is, that's preventative. Coping is then when you hit in that time of uncertainty, you need to throw up that umbrella. That's coping. That's your reactive measure. That's getting yourself back to that baseline. And it can look, you know, we're hitting into fall season. I know there's people that are like all about the pumpkin spice, you know, got that nice cozy cup of coffee or whatever it is. You know, you're eating healthy, you know, doing your hobbies, organizing, yoga, working out. I like this one because it hits on, you know, maybe you like a nice shower, a little pampering, but also like, hey, if you have a pet, you know, they can be a really great support as well. You know, you got your friends, family, laughter is a great form of self-care and coping. Going to a group, getting together with other people that are having similar experiences. Sleep, time management, working out, all of these things can be a part of self-care and coping. Not all of these are going to apply to everybody, but they are things to consider if you're looking for ways in order to do self-care or coping a little differently. So I like plants. I think I said in my bio that I'm a big plant nerd. So I always have plants with me. This is one of my guys. He's always in my office. It's really interesting that they all come with, let dirt going. They all come with this nice little thing that I usually ignore more than I'm supposed to. And it has instructions for care. Now, I hadn't actually read this guy until I was preparing this presentation. When I look at the plant's self-care little tag, it says it wants low light. Okay, but then it says within 6 to 10 feet of a window. 6 to 10 feet. That's specific. Not 5 feet, not 11 feet, 6 to 10 feet. This plant has specific things you need to do in order to make it healthy and keep it well. And we are exactly the same. But every plant is different and every person is different. So how do we figure out what that looks like? Easier said than done, right? Where do you start? Go back to the basics. What do you enjoy doing? Think about when you're bored. What do you do when you're bored? If you pull out your phone, what app are you on? Talk to somebody. What do your friends notice about you? do some research, make a list. There's going to be a reference at the end to something called the 99 coping strategies. This is actually where I started, that I didn't know what to do. And it's literally just a list of 99 different things. Try something. If it doesn't work, okay, try something else. Make that list, go down the list until you figure out some things that work for you. But the best way to know what works for you is that you have to practice. You have to practice, and you have to practice, and you have to practice. Because if you don't, it does not matter that you carry this around in your purse like I do. It does not matter if you have this on you at all times, because if you haven't practiced that self-care strategy, if you haven't done that deep breathing work, when you hit that time of uncertainty, when those stressors hit you, you're not going to remember to pull that out. So that's the important part about that connection between self-care and coping, is that you take the preventative measure and practice these skills. So when it's raining on you, you remember to pull out your umbrella. So when I was thinking about what it all around looks like, I put together that self-care, which is, that watering pot. What do you need to do to take care of your plant? You got to practice it. You can prepare for it. Put together your go bag. You have your mindfulness techniques. You have your coping skills. But there's this last piece we haven't really talked about yet, and it's support. It is really important for you to know your limits and seek a professional if you need it. Support can look like all different things. It could be friends, family. It can be a pet. When I come home and I've had a really bad day, one of the best things is my husband and I, we have a little puppy, not little anymore, giant puppy. He's a Malamute, and when I come home, he comes running at me and his ears go straight back, which is a sign of affection for Malamutes, I guess. And it's the best thing in the world. That little thing of support, that goes into my self-care. And right behind him is my husband, or I've been texting my friend, or I have a coworker that's, hey, how you doing? Or vice versa. You notice that coworker's having a hard time and you stop and say, hey, how's it going? If I've noticed anything over the past, what are we talking, 18 months, is that we are not solitary people. Even the introverts like me, we need people, we need support. And that can also be these professional supports. I think I mentioned before, they're out there because they love what they do. Mental health professionals, doctors, you're not going to shock them with whatever you have to say. That's what they're there for. I'm going to have some resources at the end if you're looking to seek professional supports, how to do that, how to start that, because that can be a really intimidating process, and it's also a very stigmatized process. So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. So we've gone over a lot of information. What do we do with this? The one is we evaluate. I threw on here, it's the Holmes-Ray, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but life stress inventory. And I remember doing this in my CRSS training, Certified Recovery Sports Specialist training with the state. And it was a major eye-opener for me and looking at the amount of stress in my life. There is the PDF link is on here. I'm not sure if everyone will have access to my slides or not, but I'll find a way to get the PDF to you if you want it. That you go through and you circle what is the life event that's going on, and you add them up. And your score puts you in a category of like how much stress you got going on. And the higher your score, the more likely you're going to, I'm going to say it again, have other issues come up. The more you're going to have those other systems that are trying to cope with that chronic stress. The other evaluation, talk to a doctor, talk to a mental health professional. If you've noticed there are issues, go and say, hey, I want to figure this out. How do we navigate this? Also monitor and learn. The monitoring can be kind of tedious sometimes. There are all sorts of things that are out there to help with that now. I use a tracking app called Dailyo. It's really cool that you can input different moods, and then you can also input different things that can trigger it. You can put in moon cycles, different foods. If you woke up late or early, you can put in places like work. So during the day, if you're like, wow, I am really angry, you can go to the app, put in that you're angry, and type in all the things like, I'm at work, I just had caffeine, I woke up late, And all of a sudden you can start seeing the conglomeration of things that led to that emotion. There's also meditation apps, Calm, Relax, Melody. You just go to the app store and just put in meditation apps, relaxation apps, whole world of them. Download like 6, see which one you like, practice it. Everybody's a little different. Find which one works best for you. Continue learning. Tricia mentioned that you could find a mental health first aid class. One of the first things I did when I joined the field is I actually took a mental health first aid class. I had no idea about it, but my employer at the time told me I should do it. And it changed how I thought about mental health completely, to the point that, this past spring, I even became an instructor. I think it's really important that we treat mental health as we do our physical health. Because when you come up to a coworker and they're not doing well, it's important for us to be able to be there for them. How do you support them? And mental health first aid can be a really great starter for that. So 10 out of 10 recommend. Go to the mental health first aid website and see where the closest course is. There's a bunch of them that are always around the community. Ask around, really recommend mental health first aid. And the others, read or go find a movie, documentary. Do something to keep learning. I threw on there the name of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. That's just my go-to favorite. That's what got me onto understanding that connection between the biology with your brain and the impact of stress on the brain, and then what it does to the rest of your body. There's the link there for the 99 coping skills, which is that list of, hey, I really don't know what to try. Like, I'm just blanking. There are 99 things you can start with. Just start checking them off. Nope, that doesn't work. That's okay. There's your list. Then we also have SAMHSA, which is Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They're a great place to go if you're looking for some sort of professional support. They have great articles. I think they got podcasts on there. They're a wealth of information when it comes to mental health. And then we have NAMI also, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We have a local chapter here. They host groups for different things and can be a great community for those that are experiencing similar things to what you're going through. And then the last is keep track of your spoons. Know that when you are coming down to you got 2 left and then you got 1 left, know when you need to seek that professional support. There is so much stigma surrounding this. So I cannot push this enough that when you get to the end of your spoons, it's okay to get help. Like I said, that's why they're there. So I wanted to throw out some of the go-to places that you can get help. There's the suicide prevention hotline, but there's also a text line. Not everybody wants to talk to somebody on the phone. There's a crisis text line even. There's PATH, just call 211. That's it, 211. And they're a great resource to, hey, I'm trying to get in with a therapist. Where should I start? They're like the resource gurus. Love it. We now have the McLean County Mental Health Triage Center. It's on the first floor of the health department building off of Front Street. And they're a literal walk-in triage center, all for your mental health. Great resource. And then we have the Illinois Recovery Services. The Department of Mental Health, they actually employ certified recovery support specialists, people that have lived experience and have gone through the training like I have, and then they do it the macro version so that the recovery principles are also within that state level. They also host like webinars. There's a specific Thursday, I'm blanking on it right now, a Thursday every month where they have a webinar that has a different recovery topic each time, and it is presented either by an agency or a person with that lived experience, and then also provides the opportunity for people with that lived experience to comment and ask questions on that topic. So last thing, don't forget your go bag. If you take nothing else away from this, remember your umbrella, that when it does rain, you can shoot up that umbrella, you can pull out your map, figure out where you are at, and then have your watering can. So you can figure out what you need to do to help yourself grow and prepare for when it's going to rain. Lastly, I know I said lastly before, but as you're going about, think about it. keep it in the forefront of your mind, because the more you're thinking about it, the more it's going to become habit. Then talk about it. I mentioned the stigma piece. The more we talk about it, the more natural it becomes, the less awkward it feels. For a lot of people, it feels really awkward to talk about mental health. Talk about it. Push through that awkwardness, because there's a lot of people that are on that same plane with you and live it. People won't always hear what you're saying. They will see what you're doing. So if you live those principles, they see you doing that self-care thing, they see you coping, they're going to take notice of that, and they might approach you and say, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And all of a sudden you got that community coming together, you're reducing that stigma, and you're not alone. Remember and remind yourself and others, you are not alone in this. The past 18 months, we've all been in the same boat, but we are not alone. We're all in this together. So those are some of the references to things I made there. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for stopping in today. Thank you so much for giving me your time. And I will take questions if anybody has them.
Yeah, so I see one question in the chat right now with asking, are there caregiver support groups in Bloomington Normal specifically for caring for the elderly?
That is a fantastic question. I know there are caregiver support groups. I don't know specifically for the elderly. I would say PATH or NAMI would be my go-tos. Figuring that out, I can look into that and get back to you. But I know there are groups that are specifically for caregivers, like groups.
So if I can chime in quickly, I will just say that when I saw the question come in, I did a quick search so that we could hopefully have an answer. That's one benefit of not being the presenter, is that I can begin to look stuff up. And I put a link in the chat box that everybody should be able to reference. And as a quick overview, there does appear to be a caregiver support group that looks like here locally. It meets the last Wednesday of each month from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. At the OSF building on College Avenue. But the resource where the information came from was through the PATH resource directory and doing a search for caregiver support groups. And it's at least about halfway down on that list because there were a lot that were out of town. But that answers that one. I do know, not to steal Kevin's thunder, but to kind of move in, I know one of the other questions that came in was about the PDF, and I believe that one was in relation to Sarah's presentation, which would also have the links and PDF sites for everything else that she referenced. So Sarah, if you are agreeable, then we can post your PDF to the website following the end of the presentation, and then everybody has all the information that you've shared.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. The other thing I'll say about support groups, I just want to come back to that. You mentioned OSF. We're talking about mental health and stuff a lot, but there are also physical health support groups. OSF and Carl, they both have them as well. So if you're also going through a specific health thing that's not mental health, there's other support groups that are specific to those as well.
So
all right, well, that's all we have for questions.
Okay, cool.
And I was going to say, well, we give people more time in case other people are still typing or taking a moment to formulate their thought. I want to reinforce that Sarah absolutely lives and breathes what she shared today. So she talks about, you know, modeling, being a representation of self-care and what you're doing, as well as communicating and identifying either that you're struggling or that there is mental health. So I have had the pleasure of knowing Sarah for a little over 2 years now in a professional capacity, and I can say that what she presents here is exactly what she embodies every single day, which breaks down the stigma and the stereotypes that tend to exist. But she is also one of the first ones to throw out a potential solution or self-care or coping strategy. And just want to remind everybody also that what is self-care for you may not be self-care for others. So for me, coffee is part of my self-care. I am emotionally in a better state, and it has nothing to do with caffeine, and because I could drink decaf and be just as happy. It is largely that it's a warm drink. It's warm, and that's comforting. And so, but for somebody else, that may increase anxiety. It may exacerbate it. And so it may be the opposite of self-care. I am going to pause because I see that we've had a few other questions come in, and I'll let Kevin take over those because I think some are some discussion points relative to support groups.
Yeah, it looks like one here is a resource that was shared in regards to the first question, which was through the community care systems in Bloomington. There might be a caregiver support group through there, so that would be a place to look. A question for Sarah that came in was, did you have to take the psychology pathway for this career, or was it social work?
Neither. So I went to school for more like politics, and I ended up in the social work field. Well, I'm gonna step back. I ended up in public health, and I had a friend. We've known each other like 18 years now. Knew me super well, and there was a position that was up. And she said, "Yeah, I think you really should try this." And so I jumped in, and I was able to use some of my like cross-cultural communication, discussion, things like that to jump in. But I didn't actually have a social work background before I started. I just had the passion for this. And so no, if you want to start in the field, there are openings where you don't have to have the background. Obviously, they mentioned that I am going back to seek my master's. So there's things you do have to do in order to advance in the field. Speaking to like the difference between continuing ed in like psych or social work, it just kind of depends what you want to do. But if you're just wanting to get into the field, you don't necessarily have to have like a bachelor's in social work, which I mean, it'll help. But there are ways to get a shoe in the door without doing that. So anybody that's really interested in this type of work, highly recommend to look into those opportunities, reach out, even just ask an agency, like what does entry level look like for you? Are there things I need to do that would give me more experience? You never know who knows who or what it is. If you have the passion for it, there's probably a way you can become involved.
I'd like to add one other resource that was mentioned here by Ms. Sonia Reese was the East Central Illinois Area Agency on Aging. They may have support groups similar to what we were looking for. I would say that's probably a good place to look. In addition to what's been posted in the chat here, I'm also going to post a link to our registration page for upcoming forum sessions as well as descriptions. In addition to that, there will also be a link for the McLean County Behavioral Health YouTube page, where you can see all of our past and current presentations from the forum. And then I also have a direct link for the Holmes Ray Life Stress Inventory, which Tricia said will also be connected to that presentation. But if you'd like to view that in the meantime, it will be accessible through the chat.
I just got to say, I love the amount of people that have jumped in to answer that first question. That really hits home, where I said, ask. You never know who knows what. We're all a community. I love the outpouring of resources there. Thank you for everybody that's chimed in. That's great.
All right, that concludes our questions for today.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem.
Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we will get the PDF of Sarah's presentation up so that all of the fantastic resources and tips that she has shared today will be available. I want to thank Sarah for the time that she gave today and has in the past. But more so even that she has shared some of her own perspective and her own experience paired with research, really just to drive home some really tangible points about what we can all do on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what life looks like or what the stressor may be. So Sarah, a big thank you to you, and thank you to all of you who joined us this morning. And if you have not yet registered but have the availability to join us again at noon, we would love to see you again. And if not, we hope you'll join us for one of the other forum sessions. So thank you very much, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks.